Thank you, Doug. And thank you, Laura, for reminding about the 1 minute. So now we're going to move to our second speaker of the day, Jim Urban. He's talking about buying and selling a home has new rules in 2021. Homes are selling in hours rather than in days, weeks, or months. There are 25 buyers for one home for sale in the Denver metro area. If you go out and try to buy a home by the old rules, you are going to be losing out over and over again. And you are going to be deeply disillusioned, disappointed, and maybe even depressed. The smart people who are winning and getting keys to the house are playing by a whole new set of rules. Jim is going to be sharing a few of the new rules that the winners are using and the losers are not. You can walk away the winner with this unfair advantage. Jim will need 6 to 8 minutes for this. Go ahead, Jim.
All right, thank you, Leah. Appreciate that. So yes, the 2021, there's some new rules, my friends, if you want to win. And if you play by the old rules, you're going to lose. All right, so today's mindset is about getting the deal done. It's just getting it done. And the way to get it done is to think about if this home is at market value, you've got to pay at least 5%, maybe 10%, maybe 15%, and maybe even 20% more than the list price. The mindset has to be around the fact that by the time you close on this house, that house will be more than that 15 or 20% that you had to pay to get it. You just have to think about that. The next point I want to make is the value of time. We're trying to take contingencies away from the seller. You have to put yourself in the shoes of the seller when you're a buyer. There's this thing called the post-occupancy agreement or a rent back. And what you do is the owner of the home becomes a renter of their own home, and the buyer becomes the landlord for 30 days after closing, maybe 60 days after closing, maybe even more than that. And because you've got to think about it, that seller of that home is going to be dealing with the same problems of our market with low inventory, trying to find a home. You need to give them the gift of time. The next point I want to talk about, which you might think is obvious to some of you, but it's not about the pre-qualification in the mortgage. It's about the 100% pre-approval, fully underwritten, approved loan before you ever step foot into the front door of that first house that you're looking at. You've got to have your I's dotted and your T's crossed in this market before you ever look at a home. And if you're a cash buyer, you want to have a proof of funds in your hands or in your computer ready to go with your offer before you ever make an offer. It needs to be a letter from your bank, not a statement, signed by the bank president. There's this next thing called the appraisal gap. Now, this is a 2021 term, appraisal gap. What is that? Here's the example. You have a starter home price today at $500,000. If you're going to be paying 15% more than that, you're at $575,000 that might take to get that house. The highest sold comp in that neighborhood, for example, is $500,000. An appraiser is not going to appraise that house for $575,000. They're probably not going to appraise that house for $520,000. If you provide a full appraisal gap from $500,000 to $575,000, which is money above your down payment and closing costs, you have a pretty good chance of winning that bid. You're just as good as a cash buyer. And that might be the only way you can beat out a cash buyer is with an appraisal gap. If you don't have that money, maybe you should be talking to grandma and getting some help about some appraisal gap money. Have you ever thought of that? So it is really a 2021 thing, I'm telling you. The next thing you might consider before you ever look at a home this year is if you currently own a home or homes, you might talk to your lender about a cash out HELOC, which is a home equity line of credit. I had a friend, his name is Phil, and earlier this year, he took over $500,000 out of his home and a HELOC loan so he could buy a home and become a cash buyer. Now, a cash buyer is what we know as cash is king. Cash is king. It can really help you get that house. The next thing is called an escalation clause. We have had those for years, but we use them more than ever because of our market. Now, an escalation clause is a protection for the buyer as well. It also gives the seller the highest price. Let's use that $500,000 example again. Let's say that you want to make an offer on this house for $500,000, but you will beat any offer by $5,000. And if you do that, and if someone offers $550,000, you've just bought the home for $555,000. Now, you may not want to go forever on that escalation clause. You might want to put an a maximum. Let's say that your max is 575. If somebody comes in at 580, you've lost. But you might feel good that you gave it your best and that you were willing to pay up to 15% above list price, but that's it. You didn't want to overpay for that house. So an escalation clause can protect a buyer, but it also can help you win. There is such a thing as an escalation clause with no maximum. And there are those buyers out there, I will say. The last major point that I want to point out is the inspection. Again, taking contingencies away from the seller. If you could keep your inspection to health and safety issues only, that's going to help you win the offer. Now, some savvy investors will completely sometimes waive the inspection. Now, if you were a seller, would you take that? Maybe so, because if you don't even have to worry about any inspection objections, that's a pretty good offer. That's another perk to help you take the offer. So let me tell you, my friends, when you want to win, you want to listen to the advice of your real estate consultant. If you don't listen, you're going to lose. Mrs. Toastmaster, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jim. Yeah.